The characters in this series need to live up to their family names and face full life consequences. Hey guys, MasakoX here. One of the things that makes for a good story, especially in the world of anime of course, is character progression. Being on a journey with a particular character, even if it's one that you like or you don't like, from the start of their adventure, or at least early on into their overall voyage of discovery, and then seeing it through to either the end of it, or to a very different position as to where you were when you first began, it's one of the things that makes anime what it is, and distincts itself from Western archetypes over the years, especially from the 90s and earlier. These stories that you see the characters facing, they all will mostly have consequences which will play out right now in the moment, or will come into the play in some way in the not too distant future. It's all the same in the real world. It makes it actually quite relatable in a way. Yeah, narratively speaking, realistically speaking, you do something, it will result in something else happening, either for you or for someone else. It's natural. And when we don't see it happen, be it in fiction or in reality, it sets out something in our brains that tells us, oh, man, that really feels unsatisfying, or that didn't feel right. In Dragon Ball, it's often said that some of the actions that play out within the overall series, from start to finish, especially during Z, the later arcs in the series, they have no meaning. What happens has no meaning, or at least has no lasting impact. Now, is that a fair assumption though? I actually think it might be. Dragon Balls are one of the most fantastical and mystical objects within popular culture, and yet the whole idea of how they work is really simple. Gather them all together and you get a wish. Not exactly the most original idea, if you ask me. X has to gather Y and they will get Z, or A will happen. But the way that it was packaged and presented to us, both in manga and anime form, made the whole series and idea quite engaging, and understandably a worldwide success. A torchbearer for anime internationally. And I think it easily deserves that accolade. However, one of the things that Dragon Ball is most infamous for seems to surround the title item. It's all about how the subject of a character's demise is treated. Now, in most cases, when a character is offed, more so for minor major characters than major ones, it is a huge pill to swallow, which a lot of the characters have to deal with. You feel the resulting story beats, and wonder how your favourite character will handle the aftermath of maybe one of their colleagues passing on and seemingly never coming back. Or maybe it's your favourite character in question and how you deal with the overall, situation. A lot of the time, you never see that character again in a typical story, not even as a ghost. That's their story done. It's really, really heavy. Dragon Ball took the concept of passing on and made it into merely a stepping stone towards a tangible afterlife and another adventure. The other world that we see, King Yema's thing, the checkout, that was really a real thing in its own right in the world of Dragon Ball, and merely just another area of existence where other characters can interact with our characters. It was indeed the next big adventure. The idea of Goku's demise 5 episodes into the next series was pretty shocking. I mean, not as shocking nowadays because we've seen it so many times before, but if you watch Dragon Ball Z for the first time and you saw the overall main character just go, you think, what? The Dragon Balls just had to be used to bring him back to face the Saiyans. That was important. But as you then got into the further sagas and you really got to understand what Dragon Ball Z was all about, and then we got another dragon in the form of Porunga, who actually seems a lot more stronger than our own dragon, these magical wish-granting orbs merely became Phoenix Downs, effectively that could revive you multiple times with no ramifications. Instead of being these mystical orbs that could do anything that you want, they were mostly just used to res. Shenron originally had a lot of caveats tied to this function. It meant that you couldn't just, overuse it. Only one revival per person. No restoration if that person was gone for over a year. If you succumb to natural causes, no, can't use them, you're gone. Now though, Dende's version of Shenron has pretty much gotten rid of all of that. It's closer to Porunga in a way. You get multiple wishes, you don't have to worry about how many times you can use it. It really feels that a character's demise really may not be as impactful as it should be. It's like an inconvenience, and therefore, the idea of consequence is just, turned on its head. The only times that it does have major issues in Z is with Chaozu's second passing, and Goku's one when he's the victim to the heart virus in the history of Trunks. Those carried huge consequences when it mattered because you couldn't bring them back, and they then brought about huge story changes, with of course us getting really one of the most harrowing stories in the series. You know, Android 17 and Android 18 taking names in the future. That was dark. We have to be fair to our subject material. We cannot categorically say that the series has lacked any sort of consequence, because if it did, would it really have been as popular as it actually has been? Would people have followed it as much as they do now? Would it have even gotten past the first arc of the manga had it not been like that? There was a real risk of the peeps over at Shueisha cancelling the Dragon Ball manga after the first, arc, Pilaf arc, because of its low sales in the beginning. If it hadn't been McCrillen and the like, who knows what may have happened. Without consequences at all, the narrative would be non-existent. There's nothing for the audiences to compare to, and so, they understandably lose interest and move on to the next thing that does have some kind of consequences, be they positive or negative. In the early stages of the story, the overall progression was a little bit easier to follow, as with most properties. I personally think that way between parts 2 and 3 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The first two entries are simple to get to grips with, but then when you throw the idea of stands into the mix, and then you have all those stats that come with them, and you have to try and understand how they're stronger in some certain ways and how they're weaker in others, you have to understand that with every single episode you meet another stand. It gets a little hard to keep up at points, and when you get to parts 4 and 5, whoa, you cannot just jump into that. But why I think Dragon Ball got a good traction once sales began to rise was that Toriyama just let the story happen, with little to no prior planning. He was the kind of guy who would let the story evolve organically over chapter by chapter. And I think that also had something to do with the fact that the deadlines were really, really tight, so you couldn't really plan. Also, Toriyama's reference and inspiration helped him initially. Journey to the West, a popular Chinese story from way back when, hundreds of years, gave the Dragon Ball adventure, the original one, the original series, its initial starting point. Toriyama just simply looked at this story and then went from there. By doing it this way, it was easy to make lasting changes. That one bad guy that decided to turn the other cheek and not make a foolish choice? Well, okay, cool. He's part of the team now. Goku learned a new technique? Well, awesome. He'll use it later and will get better at it. You see this in One Piece all the time. No wonder that show could be considered to be even more popular than Dragon Ball. But don't think that the original Dragon Ball was not a victim of its own orbs. Every major passing, except Grandpa Gohan, was averted with the use of Dragon Balls, but back then, it was something quite novel and quite a surprise. It was, dare I say it, refreshing. As we all know, and that we briefly touched upon earlier, Dragon Ball Z opened up with a different note. It opened with a total change of play of Goku's status, as well as his first demise. It turned the last main antagonist of the previous series into a valuable ally, and it expanded the story area to the interplanetary scale. Now that is a very nice start, as well as a surprising one. The consequences of Dragon Ball played out in Z in a way that we didn't expect. We could feel that the mood was changing, that this was going to be different from the original series. Even though Goku and all of his friends were resurrected and they were all still there during the course of the Frieza saga, and then we also got the Super Saiyan transformation, something that would then become the staple of the series to this day. It's one of the most recognizable parts of the show's makeup. You think Dragon Ball, you think Super Saiyan. Now, obviously, the Cell saga was different again. It, in my opinion, was the most impactful one of Dragon Ball Z. It gave Vegeta his biggest leap in character development ever, much like how Piccolo had done in the Saiyan saga. The arc woke Gohan's fighting spirit after years of him trying to resist it, or not fully understanding it and therefore getting frustrated. It left us with a lot of things to process and take in. Especially that little chestnut that Goku willingly decided not to be restored when all the paths were clear for him to do so. He was making a conscious effort to have Gohan lead the team into the new age, to protect the Earth without Goku's help from anyone that may be after him. He is a liability at this point in his own mind. Now, that was a bold move, which, as you know, didn't stick. Now this leads me to my most bold proposition. I think that the Buu Saga is where the rub lays for most of you, and why many of you have gripes with Dragon Ball Z as a whole. by softening or rolling back some of the consequences set up in the Cell Saga, and in some cases prior to the Cell Saga, that might be one of the main reasons why that arc, the Buu arc, is so controversial today. After all, many readers, and many viewers if I'm honest, truly possess a strong sense of continuity, for things to be solidly established, and for certain stories to press on. And when certain developments are then thrown out of the window, or rolled back, or forgotten, or U-turned, it might be fair for us to feel a little bit cheated and jaded about what we're watching. Even after this train of thought though, it would be unfair of us to say that there were no consequences in the Buu Saga at all. I mean, there were, especially for Vegeta. He finally found full redemption for his past actions, and formed something much closer to a friendship with Goku. Fast forward 20 years into the future, and today we, the YouTubers, as well as a lot of members of the fandom, really like to pinpoint that one of the biggest problems with the Tournament of Power in Dragon Ball Super is a lack of any lasting consequences. Nothing really stuck. This gigantic undertaking could have been noticeably shortened or made into a movie in an alternate reality, and to me, I think that most people would have been just as receptive to the idea if it were just, you know, a 90-minute or 2-hour movie. Now, on top of all of that, the Broly movie seems to indicate that the brains behind the Dragon Room are planning to, at least somehow and some way and someday, try and rectify that problem by manufacturing some sort of change of character when it comes to the likes of Goku, Vegeta, and Frieza. Now, why do we think this? Well, Goku's had his passion for getting stronger rekindled with some brand new challenges just before he was about to head out into the multiverse, you know, thanks to Jiren and Broly. Vegeta has now embraced, finally, his role as Earth's defender, and Frieza, well, okay, let's be honest, he's still evil, but he's not a different kind of evil. He's not, like, ridiculously evil. He's starting to appreciate fighting more as well. He's also greatly matured, but when all is said and done, we tend to forget about one saga that did have lasting consequences, but it was criticised for it, and that was the Goku Black arc. Yes, the ending of it was problematic. Had it have ended though at episode 66, I think we would have all been okay with it. I wouldn't be talking about it right now, but episode 67, oh, that was a really big kick in the teeth. But when you stop to think about it, that ending did give us what Dragon Ball lacked up to that point. Lasting consequences. It's kind of weird to see a saga where the protagonists lose, and I mean lose. I mean, they don't lose their lives or anything, but they lose what they were trying to save. Future Trunks lost his timeline, and he's forced now to live in some weird surrogate dimension. Yeah, something unnatural. It's really tragic, but because everything's played in that weird Toriyami way, we can never fully experience the weight of this, sadly. The battle has been lost, but we cannot really delve into the emotional connotations of this scene. Well, this is mostly because Super is now something different to what Z was. It's a Sunday morning cartoon, most likely, but wait, we're not going to blame everything just on the fact that it's shown on Sunday morning. Kids aren't dumb. I think the writers could have made it work, but despite all this, they allowed us to have this one amazing emotional outburst from Goku during the Tournament of Power, at least. You know, the one when he thought Master Roshi was gone forever. It's funny how a fake out led to more emotional outpouring than the loss of a whole universe. In fact, many universes. And that's the problem, which would be pretty hard for Super to fix until they either retcon the end of Z or go past it, therefore negating it entirely. Because as we've said many times before, and I think you know, we know how all of this is going to end. We know where nearly all the pieces are going to land. If the storyline is still as follows, then the missing pieces of the Dragon Puzzle are characters like Whis, Beerus, Broly, Lemmo, and Chilai. Were Beerus and Whis simply not present at the end of Z? Or did something happen? Something that made us have to say farewell to these two heroes, you know, changing the dynamic forever. Now, while there are still a lot of resolutions in the Peaceful World Saga that, you know, we don't even see the end results of, you know, there are some things that don't get tied up in that arc, there might be something more in Toei's reluctance when it comes to changing stuff around. There was a series where everything was about consequence. Now, okay, we criticize GT very often, but the truth is that GT's story tried to deal with changes and consequences all the time and actually making them stick. Yes, that's not the Toriyama way of doing things, and therefore it kind of gave us an uncanny valley things about Dragon Ball, but, you know, It did get results though. I mean, we might not like said results, but they were there. Goku being weakened, having to deal with every big bad going forward. Baby being karma for past sins of the Saiyan race. Dragon Balls becoming the enemy after all of this time of aiding our heroes due to the character's over-reliance on them. And then there's even Piccolo sacrificing his existence at the end. On paper, this sounds fantastic, but sadly, it didn't work, because with stories such as Dragon Ball, you need to walk this fine line between not changing too much and changing enough to make things interesting. Still, seeing how the new manga chapters are moving forward, it gives me some hope. In fact, quite a bit of hope. To not go into too much detail so as to avoid spoilers, there is a lot of great homage to the old stuff, by changing characters' reactions to what's happening. I feel that this is the way to remind us, and the characters, that what they did once will have consequences. So what do you guys think? Do you feel that Super can learn from GT and make lasting changes to its narrative? Are you okay with the status quo and you don't really want to see anything change? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!